Hi, welcome back to Mr. Menta's ELL Classroom. This video will be continuing our lesson on Chapter 9 of the Blue Book, the simple present tense. For this, you will need just this page, page 81 of the textbook, which you can download from the description in the YouTube video. You do not need to print this one either, but you will need a sheet of notebook paper to write on, and a pen and pencil. So, this video is picking up right where the other one left off. You'll notice now we're talking about a very similar exercise, only it's changed to be talking about he, she, and it. Again, talking people around the world. But this time, as I mentioned last time, we talked about I, you, we, and they last time, but not he, she, and it. So this time the grammar rule for he, she, and it becomes clear. In the simple present tense, he, she, and it get this S. Can you see the S? Okay. So he lives. Lives. That's the big new thing for the simple present tense. He lives. And any verb in the simple present tense is going to use that S. So he lives, she lives, it lives. Remember in the other one, when we were talking about I, we said, I live in Seoul. It said, I live, no S. But now in this, he lives. Lives. So this is the thing that I want to remember. It might seem like a little thing, but it's very easy to forget. In the simple present tense, when we're talking about every day, he lives, she lives, it lives. Okay? The question, where does, again, this is a new version of the word do, right? We say does for he, she, and it live. So notice here when we get the question, we don't have the S at the end of the word live, of our verb, when we have a question. We only have the S when we're making a statement, when we're making the answer. Okay? In the question, it's back to normal. Just live instead of lives. But we do have this word does. So again, we have to say, where does he live? Where does she live? Where does it live? Okay? And so I don't want to catch you saying, where do he live? No. Where does. That's the English grammar rule. That's what we're practicing here. Where does he live? And then, last box. Again, this is the same rule. What does he do? Again, notice, even here, when we use the word do again, when we say it at the end of the question, when it's our main verb, do, we don't say does. It's just here at the first part. What does, at the beginning. What does he do? Okay? This is how we conjugate verbs when we have questions in English. What does he do? What does she do? What does it do? So, that's the central grammar rule we're going to be using. Again, this is one of those exercises that used to be a speaking exercise back when we could do them at school. But now that we're doing them at home, it's going to be a writing exercise. So, we're going to have a conversation here where we're talking about these people. Instead of interviewing them, we're just talking about them. Okay? And we're going to practice using the grammar that we just went over from the box. So, what's his name? His name is Miguel. That's Miguel. Where does he live? He lives in Mexico City. Okay. What language does he speak? He speaks Spanish. What does he do every day? He eats Mexican food, because he's in Mexico. He reads Mexican newspapers, and he listens to Mexican music. Okay? So, To make this one a little shorter, you can just pick one sentence to write on this one. I think that would be fine. So over here, we're going to do pretty much the same kind of thing we did last time. Okay? Only we're going to be using the new grammar rules to talk about he, she, or it. I don't know if we have any its. It might just be he and she. Yeah. It would be a dog, but we don't have that. So, number one, you're going to write on your sheet of notebook paper now. Number one, what's her name? And pay attention to whether you're writing he or her, or his or her. Her name is Kate. Where does she live? She lives. Make sure you have that S. That's really important. She lives. Okay, that's why we're doing this, to practice remembering to put that S. So make sure you get it. She lives in Toronto. What language does she speak? And again, make sure you say does. Not what language do she speak. When we're talking about she, we say does. What language does she speak? She speaks. Speaks. The S goes on speaks, just like the S goes on live. Speaks English. Okay? What does she do every day? She eats Canadian food. Okay? Is that clear? So we're going to be writing, again, a lot of writing. We'll do a lot of writing on these at-home exercises, which I think is a good thing. We practice at least 4 sentences on each one. Watch out for saying whether you say his or her. You have to pick one. Watch out for making sure where you're going to say live and where you're going to say lives. Where you're going to say speak and where you're going to say speaks. Okay? Where you're going to say do and where you're going to say does. See? We're getting a little farther into this chapter, and now there's more things to remember, because each video builds on itself, okay? So, write down the answers on your sheet of notebook paper, and then after you've done writing, listen to what I tell you and compare it to what you wrote and see if they were the same. Okay, so for now, it's time to pause the video and write your answers. Okay, so go ahead, pause the video and write your answers. I'll wait. Okay, did you pause the video? All right, so follow along and listen closely to make sure you got those little details all correct. So the first one, I'm going to go over it again. What's her name? Her name is Kate. Where does she live? She lives in Toronto. Did you write lives? Did you remember your S? What language does she speak? She speaks English. Did you remember an S at the end of speak to say she speaks English? What does she do every day? She eats Canadian food. Or you can say she watches Canadian TV or reads Canadian newspapers. Those are all fine answers, but use the word Canadian. Get some practice on that. Okay, next. What's his name? His name is Carlos. Where does he live? He lives in San Juan. Okay, so let me just review that. I said, where does he live? No S here in the question. He lives in San Juan. You do say an S, L-I-V-E-S, for San Juan. Okay? What language does he speak? He speaks Spanish. So again, make sure you have an S here when you say he speaks Spanish, but you do not want an S when you ask the question and say what language does he speak. Okay? Because we use does. This is kind of where the S goes. You can think of it that way. The S is over here for does. We changed do to does, and so this didn't change. What does he do every day? He reads Puerto Rican newspapers. or he watches Puerto Rican TV. But make sure, whatever sentence you decided to write there, make sure you have the S. It's not he read Puerto Rican newspapers, it's he reads Puerto Rican newspapers. He watches Puerto Rican TV. Understand? Make sure you've got that S. If you don't have the S, pause the video now, check your work, and go back and add it, okay? Because the writing part is important. That's what's going to make you remember this. Okay. What's her name? Her name is Anna. Where does she live? She lives in Athens. What language does she speak? She speaks Greek. What does she do every day? She watches Greek TV, maybe. Or she reads Greek newspapers. But make sure you have an S there. Reads. Watches. Okay? All right. Halfway through. What's his name? His name is Ming. Where does he live? He lives in Hong Kong. Make sure you remember your S and lives in Hong Kong. What language does he speak? He speaks. Make sure you have your S in speaks. Chinese. What does he do every day? He eats Chinese food. Doesn't that sound good? I'm hungry. Okay. And if you wrote he watches Chinese TV, that's fine. Just practice using the word Chinese. Okay. Number 5. What's her name? Her name is Sonia. Where does she live? And remember, when you write the question, you should have no S in the question. Where does she live? Not where does she lives. Where does she live? I want to make sure we're very clear on that, because as we go forward in the chapter, they're going to assume you know that. So make sure you're getting that every time. Where does she live? She lives, now we have the S in the answer, she lives in Rio de Janeiro. Okay? What language does she speak? She speaks, again, S in speaks, because that's the answer, Portuguese. What does she do every day? She dances Brazilian dances. Okay? But make sure you have the S's there, dances. Or you could say she watches Brazilian TV or eats Brazilian food. You can get a little creative with the last one. That's fine. But make sure you have the S after the verb, where you need an S. Watches, reads, dances. Okay? Last one. What's his name? His name is Omar. Where does he live? He lives in Cairo. What language does he speak? He speaks Arabic. What does he do every day? He eats, with an S, eats Egyptian food. Or if you want to write something else there, that's okay. Just make sure you use the word Egyptian. Okay. That is the end of this exercise. You can either go on to the next video now or go on to the next video tomorrow. Ideally, all of these should be done. This chapter should be finished by the end of the week. See you next time.